Doctor and civil society activist from Bashur, Kurdistan, Goran Zangana. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So it's the main topic is Turkey's war crimes and chemical weapons usage, as well as the biological weapons in, especially around the media defense zones. Also there is a developments about the KDP that they don't let the delegations to get to do investigations about these allegations. So first of all, thank you to accepting that critical interview. I would like to start with the report, IPPNW's report. Did you have any opportunity to examine the report? What would you like to say about the Turkey state's use of chemical weapons, first of all?
Well, thank you so much for having me again. I had to look at the report. I read it more than twice, and it's an excellent report. And it is from a respected organization, the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear Weapons, which is an organization that is well respected all around the world in medical and global health circles. And it's an organization we shouldn't forget that won the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 for its efforts against nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction. So it is a very serious report. It has a lot of credible indicators and indications that Turkey unfortunately used chemical weapons in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, in Bashur. And there are indications that are coming from, as you said, from officials within the Turkish government, including the Minister of Interior, who reported to the parliament in 2021, in February 2021, that the Turkish army used tear gas in its military operations. And now, according to the Chemical Weapons Convention, the use of tear gas in military operations is prohibited in international laws. So yes, the report is serious. There are serious allegations against Turkey in the report, and it has to be formally investigated by international organizations.
Thank you. Thank you. Secondly, as you follow up the news as well, so Turkish officials' announcements, like Hulusi Akar said that they use tear gas, and some other Turkish army officials are mentioning the chemical weapons as well. So it looks like on the media a little bit that they're throwing the ball to each other, and they start these kind of officials are start talking about there will be consequences in the future that they use that chemical weapons basically. So how would you like to comment on that, about this kind of inner policies, and still Europe is silent about it? So what is your evaluation?
Well, first of all, I mean, to me and to other observers around the world and to the IPPNW and other organizations, the formal statement by the Minister of Interior, the Turkish Minister of Interior, to the parliament of that country in 2021, February 2021, was there is no doubt about that. There's no you can't argue with the fact that the Turkish army used tear gas, which is prohibited according to Article 1 of the Chemical Weapons Convention, in its war against Kurdish fighters in northern Iraq. So that's evidence in itself, and it has to trigger automatically the international community to look seriously into these allegations and establish fact-finding missions to go and investigate. Now, what happens at the international level is up to international organizations and the protocols and the procedures within these international organizations. So, for example, the Organization for Prevention of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, have its procedures, and a member state, has to apply for the organization to establish a fact-finding mission. And that's what we are missing at the moment. We have indications that Turkey used chemical weapons. There are credible indicators. but we don't have evidence. And it is for fact-finding missions to go and investigate and collect samples and do interviews, including searching hospitals and other sites, looking for evidence for the use of chemical weapons. And that is what we are missing at the moment.
What I really would like to mention is about the report, IPPNW's report. What kind of chemicals and biologic weapons could have been used? Do you think that's a very important point, because we interviewed many other doctors and experts on their areas, but how would you going to comment on that? Because on the report we have seen mustard and some tear gas as well, but what else can be about these weapons, and how can Turkey have them in their inventory?
So, as a
Thank you.
doctor and as a public health activist and a civil society activist, I receive reports from colleagues and from organizations on the ground that have indicators of the potential use of chemical weapons. There are patients who come with signs of eye problems, skin problems, lung problems that can be attributed to chemical weapons. And as you referred to, the IPPNW report also have indicators for the use of chemical weapons by Turkey. There are substantial amounts of chlorine that could have been produced from hydrochloric acid and from bleach that were found in the sites of military action by Turkey. And we know from the conflict in Syria that chlorine has been used, and actually the OPCW has confirmed through its fact-finding missions the use of chlorine. And we know the role of Turkey in Syria and how politically Turkey contributed to the war in Syria. So this is and also from epidemiological and from clinical evidence, we have patients, we've seen photos of patients, particularly in Syria, coming with foams in their mouths, secretions from their eyes, and all of the signs of the use of chlorine. So there are a number of indicators that suggest to me as a doctor and as a public health activist that actually there is a lot of evidence and a lot of indicators which show the potential use of chemical weapons in northern Iraq.
So, have you been lately as a doctor in the area, and would you have you been in, let's say, any delegation? Did you go there? Did you witness? Did you do any research, or is there any plan to go there about?
So, in addition to the delegation that was sent by the IPPNW, which was a fantastic mission, and I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate the colleagues who did that mission and also produced the report. There are also other attempts for other colleagues to join and go to investigate. However, as you said in the beginning of this interview, the Kurdistan Regional Government, and especially the Kurdistan Democratic Party, part of the Kurdistan Regional Government, strongly opposes any delegation or any mission that goes and investigate these alleged use of chemical weapons, which is very unfortunate and disappointing, to be honest, from somebody who is from that area. I feel ashamed from the Kurdistan Regional Government for not allowing these missions to go and investigate. And that's why we need more formal fact-finding missions. We need the international community to mobilize and to be triggered to trigger the Article 10 of the Chemical Weapon Convention by the OPCW, to go and have a formal fact-finding mission to collect evidence for the use of chemical weapons. Unfortunately, at the moment, we are trying our best to collect epidemiological clinical samples and do interviews with patients and healthcare workers. But unfortunately, the Kurdistan Regional Government has been resistant and has been actively opposing such missions and putting obstacles in front of organizations and colleagues and doctors to go to the region and investigate.
Thank you, dear Goran. So, you mentioned about the situation in the region as well. So, the report is clear and it's very transparently published as well. IPPNW's report. So, do you think, after all, is the international institutions will still be able to maintain their current silence? Very shortly, very briefly about.
So again, unfortunately, I mean, there is a critical mass now. There are a number of organizations, colleagues, individuals, and other societies who are putting pressure on governments, on parliaments, and on the OPCW to do something. However, the interaction, we know how the OPCW works, and the way they can trigger Article 10 of the Chemical Weapon Convention is through a state party demanding or requesting formally a fact-finding mission. It cannot happen through individuals, it cannot happen through organizations or even members of parliament. But it is important for activists in Europe and elsewhere to write to their members of parliament, to write to organizations like the IPPNW, and continue the pressure.
How does the process work after the chemical weapons are brought to the agenda for any country? So what's gonna be the process, just to let the our audience to know? Shouldn't an investigation be started, data collecting, listening the witnesses as well? So, for example, as you remember, the reason for the US intervention in Iraq 2003 was the use of chemical weapons, basically. So, in this political atmosphere, how does all this process going to work? Very shortly, very briefly, please.
Of course. So again, despite the fact that there are procedures and policies and protocols for the for starting a fact-finding mission, however, as you said, there are political calculations and there are political interference. So in this situation, as politics stands, it will be difficult to established the fact-finding mission to go and investigate Turkey's alleged use of chemical weapons. However, we saw that in Syria. I mean, more recently, you mentioned the Iraq War in 2003, but more recently in Syria, there was a fact-finding mission established by the OPCW. A Security Council was involved, and they went and they interviewed people and they collected samples and they confirmed the use of chlorine and chemical weapons in the war in Syria. I think that is also possible in Iraq, in northern Iraq and Kurdistan. We need a state. We need a state to demand and to trigger Article 10 of the Chemical Weapon Convention to do that. And then, until we are able to do that, unfortunately, all of the pressure will not be effective.
Thank you. Lastly, very shortly, briefly, is there anything else you would like to add on? Something that I didn't ask about Turkey's war crimes and use of chemical weapons? Please have the last words. Thank you.
Sure. I think it is very timely. What we are doing at the moment is very timely. Turkey is escalating its pressures and its attack against Bashur and also against Rojava. We need to mobilize every possible energy and activism to put pressure on members of parliament, civil society, other organizations in Europe, in America, in North America, to put pressure on these states who are members of the OPC or of the Chemical Weapon Convention to trigger Article 10 of that convention and to put pressure on the OPCW to establish a fact-finding mission to investigate these allegations.
Dr. Goran Zangana from Bashur, Kurdistan. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.